In this video, we are going to cover all aspects of head covering for Jewish women. We will be going through all the sources with my Rabbi Yitzchak Steinberg, who is the Rosh Kollel of Eretz Chemda Ranana. He also trains other men to become rabbis. He is also a Levite. His family has an unbroken chain of rabbis in every generation. He himself is from Jerusalem, and he was a student of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach of blessed memory. In this video, we will cover the following topics. We will first explore the biblical source for women needing to cover their hair once they are married in Judaism. We will also be discussing how much of a woman's hair need to be covered. Can you cover your hair with a hat? Can you cover your hair with a wig? Who can see a woman's hair uncovered? Is the modern day wigs that we see today, is that allowed in Judaism? What types of wigs are allowed and what types of wigs are not allowed? Can you use Indian hair for wigs, for example? Can you cover your hair with just a hairband like we see many women do today? And many other related topics. So let's get started. Rabbi, what is the biblical source for a Jewish woman to cover her hair once she's married?
Excellent question. Where's the source? First of all, in general, for a woman, married woman, Jewish woman that has to cover her hair according to biblical law. The Talmudic discussion is in Tractate Ketubot, page 72a, going on 72b. It's a short passage, so we'll go through just a few lines. The mission discusses a woman who violates the customs of the Torah, Dat Moshe v'Yehudit. Dat Moshe is when she actually transgresses a prohibition of Torah, of our Bible. Yehudit is when it goes against the tradition of those who keep Torah. Tradition means that it was passed from generation to generation, that this is the way to keep the Torah. Sometimes it's hard to tell from the Torah itself or from the Mishnah or from the Gemara, so tradition helps us understand which way to keep the Torah every generation. A woman who yotz'ah ve'rosha parua, if she goes out of the house and her head is uncovered, she is considered a woman who's violating dat yehudit, the obligation according to tradition to cover one's hair. For a woman to cover her hair. Married woman. Says the Gemara, this isn't just tradition. Rosha parua deoraita. It's not just tradition. It's based on a direct pasuk verse in the Bible. You don't need, in this case, you don't need the tradition to explain to you how to keep Torah. It says it explicitly in the Torah. Where does it say it? Dichtiv ufara et rosh haisha. This is about a woman who is suspected to have committed adultery and fiddled around with a different man when she's married to one. The Kohanim, she was taken to the Beis HaMikdash, and the priests in the Beis HaMikdash uncovered her hair, para et rosh haisha, in order to embarrass her in public so that she may admit to the truth. If she doesn't want that to be done to her, she'll say, no, don't do this to me. I sinned. I really sinned. So this is a way to threaten her to admit to the truth. So the Gemara derives, the Talmud derives from this, that she came with her head covered. Otherwise, there's nothing to tear off her head, embarrass her. If she doesn't have to cover her hair, if a married woman doesn't have to cover her hair, so how does the Torah know? How is the Torah so sure that the priests can uncover her hair if she came with an uncovered hair? So it has to mean that there's an obligation of the Torah to cover one's hair. And it's not only dat yehudit, it's not just tradition, Jewish tradition.
Rabbi, how do we know that unmarried women should not cover their hair? Like what is done in the Arab world, where we see young girls covering their hair. Maybe it should be the same in Judaism?
I'll answer in two ways. First of all, we care very much for a bachelor, whether it's male or female, to find a spouse to marry. And it's very difficult for a single woman who isn't married yet not to expose her hair in order to find a spouse. That's one of the attracting points of a woman. And the Torah prefers to have her head uncovered in order for her to find a spouse and build a home, a family, shlom bayit, to create a house, a household, and to continue the lineage and the heritage of the Jewish people, than to have her cover her hair and then may lose out on the ability to attract men and marry them.
Rabbi, was this always the case that unmarried Jewish women did not cover their hair in Judaism? Or is this something new that developed over time, perhaps?
Yes, always. It was never the custom. Young girls would never cover their hair. No. And according to Jewish law, not necessary. There is a point made by the Magen Avraham. There's a commentary in the Shulchan Aruch called Magen Avraham. He's one of our, maybe the main commentator in Shulchan Aruch that we follow, halacha. He says that a single woman, although her hair doesn't have to be covered, but she should braid her hair. It shouldn't be flying in the air. It has to be tied together. So it gives it a little bit more of a modest appearance, but it doesn't have to be covered according to any posik. No one holds in the Jewish world that a single woman has to cover her hair. The second reason is because the idea of covering one's hair, a woman covering her hair, is in order to remain close to her own husband only and not to be attractive to other men while she's married. The moment she's not married, it's much less of an issue. Because a married woman, chas v'chayilah, who commits adultery, gets tied up with another man, liable to death penalty according to Torah. That's one of the worst sins. Agayot is one of the worst sins. One must die and not commit this sin. If you're at a gun hold, they say to you, either you commit adultery or I kill you, you have to die for it. It's one of the three sins that we die for. So it's much worse. It's much more stringent. It's much more terrible if a woman who's married sees another man. But when she's single, it's not as bad. So when we weigh the pros and the cons between a single woman have to cover her hair and a married woman, of course, a married woman is much more necessary for a married woman to do. V'tana dever Rabbi Yishmael, a Tana, one of our biggest sages, Rabbi Yishmael, teaches us, Azara livnot Yisrael shelo yetzu beforo harosh, that this pasuk verse in the Torah regarding the woman who's suspected of committing adultery, that the priests in the Beis Hamikdash uncover her hair, this phrase in the Torah teaches us married women must cover their hair. Otherwise, there's nothing to uncover. So that's what we learn out from this pasuk, and it's their right. It's from the Torah, it's from the Bible, written clearly, derived from this clear action of the priests that a woman married woman has to cover her hair. The previous verse coming from the Mishnah tells us that it's just tradition that a married woman covers the hair. Now we find out that it's much earlier and it's a much greater source. It's a much greater source. It's from the Bible itself, directly from the Bible. So the Gemara answers, Deoraita kalata shapir dami. Dat Yehudit afilu kalata nami yaso. The Gemara answers the following. From the Torah we can only derive, from that verse that we read before, we can only derive that her head has to be covered with something. She doesn't come uncovered to Beit HaMikdash, has to cover with something. Now, kalata literally means a basket. So she could place a basket over her head, which has a lot of holes. It doesn't say in the Torah that her head has to be fully covered. It just says she comes to Beit HaMikdash with some head covering, and the priests remove the head covering in order to embarrass her, that they will now embarrass her in public if she doesn't admit to what she had done. Dat Yehudit, the tradition passed down from generation to generation, Jewish tradition, afilu kalata nam yasu, that a basket is not enough. Midoraita, from the Torah, from the Bible, it would have been enough to cover one's head with a basket. But since it has many holes, and the hair can be visible through those holes, can be seen through those holes, so traditionally, based on tradition, married women cover their hair totally. And it doesn't say just that it's a nice thing to do. It says, afilu kalata nami asur. we mustn't allow any of the hair to be seen through the holes of the basket. Therefore, we have to use, a married woman has to use something much more full covering than a basket. Then it goes on in the discussion in the Gemara, not certainly what happens if she's just out, she's not totally outdoors, she's just in her backyard, how much has to be covered there? Because until now we spoke about a woman who goes outdoors totally, she's in the street, in a marketplace, everyone sees her. What about if she's in her backyard? Is there a difference? Discussions of that sort.
Rabbi, what can be used as a head covering in Judaism? For example, can a woman wear a hat to cover the hair? Would that be okay?
There's two discussions we have to ask ourselves. First of all, head coverings that aren't completely closed in, hair can be seen through them. That could be compared to the kalata, to the basket. And the second question is, how much of the hair has to be covered over her head? Meaning, can she leave a slight line of hair uncovered, or does the entire skull have to be covered? That's another question. So with regards to holes, or when the covering is not complete with regards to what can be seen through the head covering, we said that's dat yudi, traditionally not acceptable. With regards to how much of the hair has to be covered when the cover is complete, you don't see any of the hair, but she leaves out a little bit of her hair on the sides or in front or in back, a little bit that's uncovered. Would that be okay? From this section in the Talmud, it seems like that's not good at all. It's not okay. Yeah. Because if even holes aren't good, so definitely a whole line of hair, a whole strand of hair can't be left uncovered. But there's another Gemara in Brachot which discusses a man who is about to read the Kriyat Shema, the Shema, or to bench after eating, to say a blessing after eating, or Shmoneh Esrei, the Amida, the 19 brachos that we say very carefully and with full kavana, full intent. And there's a woman in front of him as he's about to pray, and the woman has her head covered, but not fully. There's some strands of hair, some areas in her head that aren't covered. How much would it be considered improper so that he wouldn't be able to pray in front of her? So the Gemara there says, the Talmud there states that up to one tefach can be yet uncovered. Tefach b'shayr va. Tefach is 8 centimeters. Right, it's like the width of 4 fingers. So the thing is that it's in one area of the head, not throughout from ear to ear. You're talking about the parameter of the 4 fingers and not from ear to ear 4 fingers. That's much more than a tefach. Moshe Feinstein, one of the greatest poskim of our generation of recent times, living in America, and wrote extensive tshuvot, responsa books on all parts of Torah, on all areas of Judaism, He came up with the idea that if you leave 2 fingers uncovered throughout the head from ear to ear, that is the parameter of a tefach. If you take the shetach, the area of a tefach equals 2 fingers exposed from ear to ear. That's what he allowed for a woman to go around. Now, there's a whole discussion if that's true, because that section in Brachot that we mentioned before doesn't discuss the obligation from the woman's point of view to cover her hair. It discusses when a man would like to pray in front of a woman who has part of her hair uncovered, how much can be uncovered and still he can say Kriyat Shema. It doesn't mean that she's right by uncovering anything. It could be that she's supposed to cover entirely. Her whole head, whole skull has to be covered. Just that if she's not behaving properly, how much improper behavior would prevent the man from davening from praying in front of her? That's the question. And therefore, not necessarily can we learn out from Tractate Brachot the obligation from a woman's point of view of how much to cover her head. That's only in Ketubot 72, which we read before, and there it doesn't say anything about leaving a little bit of the hair uncovered. But still, Rav Moshe Feinstein is such a tremendous posek, And he understood it the first way we explained, that the Tractate Brachot, page 20, does teach us that it's okay for the woman to have her head uncovered up to a tefach. And his understanding and his measurement explained that this means 2 fingers, the width of 2 fingers from ear to ear. That's how much he allows. And if he allows, we can definitely take that as a ruling, a strong ruling. There are poskim who hold not so, and like the Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer, who lived approximately 300 years ago in Hungary, he was this huge posek in the Ashkenazi world. He had thousands of responses to all around the world in all sections of the Torah. He definitely held the other way, that the obligation of a woman to cover hair is complete. Her entire head has to be covered. If it's exposed up to 2 fingers, up to tefach, it's okay to say Kriyat Shema, but she's not okay with doing that. It's not right. From her point of view, it's not right. It's sinful. So we have also a very interesting Talmudic story about Durmaskit, I believe her name was, a woman who had 7 sons of hers. All 7 sons of hers were high priests, Kohen Gadol in Beit HaMikdash. So they asked her, how are you so fortunate to have 7 sons all becoming the high priests in Beit HaMikdash? Her answer was, Shelo ra'u korot beiti sarot roshi. Never did the walls of my house ever see the hairs on my head. Meaning she kept her head covered in her house, in the private domain, where no stranger would see her. She kept her head fully covered day and night. Never ever did she expose her hair even within the walls of her house. Now that's, of course, a huge stringency. That's not halacha. That's not what we're meant to do according to halacha. It's something that she took upon herself to behave that way. Extra modest. That even inside her house, even in front of her husband only, no strangers seeing her, she yet had her head covered at all times, 24/7. But that made her a very righteous woman, and that created this type of holiness in their house, purity in their house, which in turn developed into 7 sons of hers becoming the high priests in the Beit HaMikdash.
Rabbi, must a woman cover her hair in her own house?
No, so we just mentioned that that's a huge stringency. You don't have to do that. Of course, when a stranger comes in to visit a person who's not her husband or children, she should have her head covered.
Rabbi, you said that a married woman does not need to cover her hair in the house, in front of her husband and her children. But what about other family members? Can they see her hair uncovered?
After she gets married, her siblings, strict halacha tells us that she's able to uncover her head because they're used to her. They're used to seeing her uncovered because they grew up with her in the house. Is it the best way to go about it? No, because after she's married, then her whole status changes. She's now a married woman. She's no longer single girl sister of theirs. She's a married woman. She's connected with her husband now. They're like one, and she's a little bit separated from the rest of the family now with regards to her modesty, in regards to what she exposes. So it's best if she tries her best not to expose her hair in front of her siblings. Of course, brothers. Sisters is fine. In front of her brothers, better not. But if it's extremely uncomfortable or she's by her parents for a long while, a week, 2, 3 weeks in a row, and it's very uncomfortable for her to keep her head covered all that time in the house, then she's able to expose it in front of her brothers because they're not drawn by her exposing her hair because they're used to it from being their sister all the years. Same goes for father and mother, meaning, or grandparents also. Her parents and grandparents, same as the siblings, that they definitely are allowed to see her that way, but better, to keep it covered because now she's with her husband. That's her closest relationship, and she has to act modestly towards the rest of the people.
Rabbi, can a woman see another woman's hair uncovered even if this woman is not a family member?
Correct, because the woman has no sexual reaction or draw to a different woman who has their head uncovered.
Rabbi, but what if the woman is a lesbian, for example?
Okay, but that's still not the norm. And it's not necessarily her hair, maybe, I don't know. But we don't decide halacha based on minority, a great minority. It's still a great minority. We can't say that it's something very common. Now, let's deal with the next point. So, to summarize, we say to be uncovered totally outdoors in the public domain is a deoraita, is something that's not allowed from the Torah. Deoraita sin. To be covered with a net or a basket, something of that sort that has a lot of holes in it all around, and the hair can be seen through the holes, is okay from the Torah point of view, but it's not okay from the customary point of view. The custom of Jewish girls, Jewish women, from generation to generation was to cover their hair totally. Nothing should be seen through holes. How much of the hair can be exposed while the rest of it is completely covered, but just a strand of hair is exposed? That's up to width of 2 fingers from ear to ear. Okay. According to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, other poskim say not even that, but it's definitely okay to rely on his opinion. Now, the following question. Can one cover their hair with a wig, or a sheitel as they call them in Yiddish, which we have to differentiate between 2 types of wigs. There was the old-fashioned and the new and the modern ones. The old-fashioned, we see them in pictures, or some of our grandmothers still go that way. These wigs that almost look like straw. They're so obvious, artificial, non-hair looking. You don't see them. They don't look at all like natural hair. That's one type of wig, and they're short. It's a short wig, and it just looks like obviously like a wig. No problem to detect that she's wearing a wig.
Rabbi, how short must a wig then be?
Well, there's no measurement of such type in the poskim. It has to be something that doesn't attract attention. The longer the hair, the more attention it attracts.
Up to the shoulders.
So up to the shoulders it's not as an opinion. It's just that the poskim checked reality, what length of hair attracts, and they said up to the shoulder it still looks quite modest. The moment it passes the shoulder, it attracts more attention. Flies in the air and can be attractive. So that's true. Up to the shoulder would be the maximum length of the sheitel, of the wig. But the main point here is the fact that the wigs, ancient wig, meaning 2 generations ago, not talking about thousands of years ago, 2 generations ago, the wigs were very obvious wigs, wiggy. They were wiggy. They looked totally artificial, not natural at all. In modern days, these past 2 generations that we're in now, the wigs have become much more sophisticated. They are made to look like natural hair, or the more expensive ones are made of natural hair. Just not her hair herself, made from someone else's hair. But they look totally natural. It's almost impossible for other women to decide whether this woman has her head covered or is it her real hair. It's it imitates the hair so much, and for men, for sure, no way to see it. Men definitely would think that it's her real hair uncovered. And then the question is does this work as what the Torah commands a woman to cover her hair? Because the idea behind head covering is to be less attractive. That's the whole idea. You're married now, you found your husband, you found your spouse, you don't have to attract any other men, you should try your best not to be attractive. You don't have to look ugly, but you don't have to look beautiful. You found your man. Towards your man at home, everything is allowed in the right time, of course, within the month, but during the pure days of the month. But for strangers, the outside world, try to keep as modest as possible because you don't want to attract anyone. So this modesty leads the Torah and our sages to prohibit a woman to go around with her own hair exposed. So it misses the point. It misses the point if she covers her hair with natural hair or natural looking hair, and especially if it's long, then she becomes completely attractive as if she was with her own hair. So what have we done?
Rabbi, but technically speaking, then a natural hair is fully covered, So by Torah law, she will be okay. Or am I mistaken?
Because it's technically covered. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to go now. Search for sources in the Talmud discussing actually this question, whether a wig is considered a hair covering, a proper hair covering or not. But I'm just trying to point out that even if we find out that technically speaking, it is considered her hair, that her hair is covered, a head covering, it doesn't mean that it's the proper way to cover your hair. Because if we do something technical, which misses the point, the depth and the meaning, the real meaning behind the Torah commandment, then we're just making fun of the Torah commandment. We need to understand firstly that it's definitely defying the spirit of the law. And since the whole point of head covering is to be less attractive,
Rabbi, how do we know that head covering for married women is to make her less attractive to other men? How do we know that?
no, that's already when you uncover her. But talk about why would the Torah in the first place command a woman to cover her hair? Why is she commanded to do that? Not talking about when they uncovered her to embarrass her. That's something else. That's something separate. But why have a married woman cover her hair? I think it's very obvious that the point of the Torah is that. Try to think of another reason. Maybe another reason, but this is the reason that's brought down in all the books, and that's what it's meant to do.
Rabbi, there's people that could say that in the old days, all women covered their hair, even non-Jewish women. So how do we know it is still applicable today in Jewish law? Maybe it changed or developed over time.
That would be a good argument had the Rabbi Yishmael not learned out from this pasuk, this verse, that woman must cover her hair, but he did that. He learned out from this verse, telling the priest to uncover her head, in order to embarrass her. Mikan azarai not Israel shelo yitzu b'faro harosh. Rabbi Yishmael is a sage that tremendous, knew the whole Torah in and out, upside down, and any way you look at it. And he was living back in the days of the Second Temple. Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol, he was a high priest himself, living in the midst of the Second Temple. We're talking about way back. We're talking about more than 2,000 years ago. And he's telling us that the Torah commands us. It's a deoraita. The Gemara says, our sages are telling us that this verse in the Torah alludes to the fact that a woman must cover her hair. This argument that it's only based on tradition, that's how they used to walk around in those days, and therefore they had to uncover. If the Torah specifies this, it means the Torah wants her hair to be covered. And to uncover it is embarrassing. And if it wants it, so it doesn't matter if it was traditional then or not, it becomes a Torah law. And that's what the Gemara here is telling us, it's a Torah law.
Rabbi, so would it then not be better to cover your hair with a wig? Because in that way, the hair is completely covered. Rather than if you cover it with a cloth and then you expose the two fingers in the front, like you said, which is from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein of blessed memory, but then you still have actual hair exposed.
Okay, so let's ask according to that idea. So why don't you cover your head with material, with cloth, a mitpachat, a techel, but fully cover it completely, all around, without the fact that we're allowing, based on Moshe Feinstein, we're allowing two fingers to be exposed, that you can understand that as a leniency that you do not want to accept. So have the head fully covered, and but with material, with cloth. So saying the wig is problematic because of looking natural. And that's exactly what the Torah is trying to avoid, to prevent. So it's worse than covering with mitpachat, with cloth over her head, because that doesn't look like her hair anymore, no hair. And if you don't want anything visible, so cover the entire head with the material. Don't leave out the two tfachim, and then you got everything clear, you got everything perfect. Okay, now let's just view a few sources discussing the Torah perspective or Chazal's perspective about wearing a wig. The first source we'll take is from the Gemara Shabbat 64b. Okay, there's a Mishnah where it says the following: Yotz'a isha, a woman can leave the house on Shabbat. Remember, this chapter in Masechet Shabbat discusses the ability to walk out of the house carrying something. When there's no Eruv around the city, we mustn't carry anything. Can a woman leave her house wearing something over her head to cover her hair? It's not part of her, so it's clothing. So it says, Yotzai isha bechutei se'ar bein mishela bein mishel chaverta. This means that she can go out with a ribbon or something that ties her hair, not the covering of her head. It's like a ponytail or something that confines her hair. She can go out with such a thing on Shabbat. And then it's not really clothing. It's just an extra piece. But it makes her look nicer, so it is considered like her clothing. Okay. And then all kinds of other things. And the Mishnah also says, uvepe'a nochrit, and wearing a wig. But then the additional word here is lachatzer. It doesn't say here to go outdoors. It speaks about chatzer. Chatzer is a backyard or front or the lawn of the house. So, from this Mishnah, the Shiltei Giborim, Rabbi Yeshua Boaz, he's a commentary on the Rif. Behind the Gemara, we have the Rif, who was one of the very first Rishonim, or very, very late Geonim period, between the Geonim and the Rishonim, around 1,000 years ago, the Rif lived. So one of the commentaries around him is the Shiltei Giborim, Rabbi Yeshua Boaz, who lived around 500 years ago, the days of the Shulchan Aruch Rema. The Shulchan Aruch based his psak on three big poskim, and one of them was the Rif, right? He was the first one of the three. So the Shiltei Giborim derives from this Mishnah directly our topic, because he says the fact that we allow her to go out with the wig on Shabbat, having to do with an eruv, without an eruv you're not allowed to carry, that's one thing. Like you said before, that's like clothing. She's wearing her wig to cover her hair. That's perfectly understandable, no problem. But we can derive from this that she's allowed to walk out with the wig. Had that been not allowed, why would the Mishnah mention a sinful act and telling you it's okay to walk out on Shabbat, but it's not okay to wear a wig in the first place? So from here, the Shiltei Giborim Yeshua Boaz derives that it is okay for a woman to cover her hair with a wig. No, not the Rif, because this is a Mishnah, so it's not the Rif. It's deriving from a Mishnah. Mishnah is way before the Rif. Tanaic period. The Rabbi Yeshua Boaz is deriving it. He's just a commentary around the Rif, but he's discussing the Mishnah. So
that's not related to the Rif.
Not related to the Rif at all. Okay. He's just a commentary around the Rif who derives from the Mishnah, directly from the Mishnah, that it should be permissible for a woman to cover her hair with a wig and go outdoors.
Rabbi, but what I think he's talking about is wigs that did not look like natural hair, which is the modern wigs that we have today, or am I mistaken?
Correct. That's a very excellent assumption you just made. Now, exactly, the type of wigs they used to wear in those days are not nearly as professional and beautiful as they are today. For sure, you're right. But we'll soon see that even the fact that he derived from our Mishnah to permit a woman to go out, even that's questionable. We'll soon see a different posek, a different achron, a person who lived 300 years ago, is going to contradict the Shiltei Giborim's assumption that we can derive from this Mishnah that a woman is allowed to go out with a wig. But let's first see what he says. We see from this, to bring proof from this Mishnah, women who cover their head after they're married, instead of their own hair, they cover their hair with someone else's hair, with their friend's hair. From our Mishnah, right? Because if the Mishnah permits to go out of the house on Shabbat without an eruv, wearing a wig, it means you're allowed to wear a wig, right? As simple as that. Okay, so many achronim argue and contradict his proof from here. How come? One of them is the Be'er Sheva, a responsa called Be'er Sheva in Siman Yud Chet, in chapter 18 of the book, the responsa book, Shud Be'er Sheva. He comes and says the following. If you noticed, as I mentioned, I sneaked it in before, Uvepeah nochrit lachatzer. The whole Mishnah is talking about going outdoors with things that a person would be wearing. Is that okay or not? Suddenly, when it reaches the peah nochrit, the wig, it adds another word, lachatzer. Why did the Mishnah have to add that word? You're talking about a person who's going out from the house, private domain, to Reshut Rabim, to public domain. Suddenly, right by the peah nochrit, the wig, the Mishnah suddenly says she's allowed to go out from her home, private domain, to the courtyard around the house. Why limit the woman to go out only to the courtyard and not to Reshut Rabim? If this is considered clothing, so she should be allowed to go out to Reshut Rabim as well. Says the Be'er Sheva. The Mishnah is not allowing her to go out to Reshut Rabim, not because of Shabbos, not because of it being interfering with the halachos of Shabbos. It's because she mustn't go out in public domain with a wig. The wig is the issue, not Shabbos. So we only allow her to go into her backyard or into her garden or front lawn, wherever it is, but that's still a secluded area. It's still fenced in, less people walk by, less people come in, less people see her. So into that area, which is also, as we said before, mentioned in Ketubot 72b, that there are less limitations and less of a necessity to cover her hair within her backyard, within her courtyard. So here's an example, that peah nochrit is not the best way to cover one's hair. So we only allow her to go into her chatzer, to her backyard or front lawn, and not to go outdoors totally. This would not be allowed because of the problem of being immodest, acting in an immodest way outdoors. So that's a very powerful idea countering the proof that the Shiltei Giborim found in this Mishnah to support women who go out with who would cover their heads with wigs. So why would the Mishnah have to say b'chatzer? So you're right. Even if one wants to base their source on the Shiltei Giborim allowing women to wear wigs, but take the wigs of those days, of 500 years ago, the days of Shiltei Giborim, or the days of Mishnah, 2,000 years ago. Don't take wigs of today and compare them to the wigs, to these ancient wigs of those days, which were like straw on her head. Another way of disputing the proof brought down by the Shiltei Giborim from our Mishnah to allow women to wear wigs is a very powerful question. One of the ways to explain the fact that she can only go out to her courtyard, to the chatzer, wearing a wig, if you don't base it on the fact that it's immodest to go all the way outdoors with the wig, is to say that some pieces of clothing that a woman wears, like let's take jewelry. Can she wear jewelry walking outdoors on Shabbat without an eruv? So it depends. It depends.
Unless you can take it off.
Exactly. That depends on that question. If it's something that she would take off and show, she's not allowed to walk outdoors with it because she may do that by mistake. Forget that it's Shabbos, take it off and walk with it and show it to someone.
Women also do that.
So there is an understanding that the reason she can't go out altogether to Reshut Rabim, to public domain, with a wig, there's an understanding because she may take it off to show someone how it looks. Now, if we're talking about the head covering, that's the only thing she has over her head, how in the world would that be possible that she would take it off to show while she has her head uncovered in public domain? It has to mean that the women then, even those who wore wigs, used to have another head covering below the wig, underneath the wig. And therefore she could take off her wig to show someone, to show her friend, look how beautiful my wig is. Even the wigs in those days. She used to show and say and be impressed by her wig. But it has to be that she had a whole other head covering that kept her head covered. She just wore the wig on top of it to look nicer. But she had a full head covering underneath it. So it doesn't, again, you cannot derive from this Mishnah, take proof from this Mishnah that she's allowed to cover her head only with the wig, without the cloth or material covering her head properly underneath the wig. So these are two very powerful questions contradicting the Shiltei Giborim, Shiltei opinion that from here we can derive that a woman can cover her hair just with the wig. And after all that, it wasn't such a beautiful wig like it is today. So even if you back yourself on his opinion, on that source, it's not a good source for today with the beautiful wigs we have today. Okay, The Gra, by the way, the Gaon of Vilna, he also holds that the only way a woman can go out with the wig here is only because she has another head covering underneath it. The Gra also says the same idea, and definitely not alone.
Rabbi, would it then be allowed today to cover the hair with a cloth, and then you take a modern wig and just put that over the cloth?
That would definitely be perfectly fine according to Torah law, perfectly fine, because her hair is covered with cloth, so she's actually covering her hair totally. The fact that she puts a wig on top of that, then you're right, that's only not according to the spirit of the law. Because because the whole purpose is not to be attractive, not to attract other men, and now she's looking beautiful like as if she has natural hair. So it's against the spirit of the law. That would definitely not be against the law itself, because she has her head covered with cloth, which is definitely 100% fine. So that's only against the spirit of the law. But by the way, spirit of the law doesn't mean that you can easily neglect and do whatever you want. If the whole meaning of the Torah is to make sure that a married woman stays for her husband and doesn't attract other men and doesn't fool around with other men and all that, then it's a very important message to take. And to neglect it just because you want to look beautiful, she wants to look beautiful, is very problematic. Hashem knows better than us how to prevent us from fooling around. And if he decided that this is the way, we should be outsmart Hashem. He'll say, no, we're smarter than you. We know nothing's going to happen. But Hashem thought it would, that it could lead to something. So how are we smarter than Hashem? So I wouldn't take it lightly, even if it's just against the spirit of the law. Okay, another quote is in the Gemara of Nazir. Nazir is a person who accepts upon himself to be secluded from wine and being around a dead body or going to a cemetery and cutting his hair. He mustn't do all three things. He's wants to become like a nun or a priest that is completely devoted to Hashem and distance himself from materialistical life, the materialistical world.
Rabbi, I also learned that when this Nazir finishes his Nazir period, he actually needs to bring a sin offering, which shows us that this is not the ideal way the Torah wanted us to live.
Correct, because he exaggerated a little bit, right? So in this tractate of Nazir, 28a, it says the following. A woman who accepted upon herself, took a vow to become a Nazirah, okay, she wanted to become such a woman.
Can a woman be a Nazir, Rabbi? I thought only a man can be a Nazir.
No, women can become a Nazirah also.
Really?
Yes.
I never heard of a woman as Nazirah.
Yeah, I don't know if
the examples we get is men.
the examples are men,
Samson.
but right? But it doesn't mean that women cannot become. No, they can for sure. But the question is, if she's a married woman, can her husband break her vow of becoming a Nazirah? We know that if he finds out the day she took the vow, that day, he's allowed to break it, providing it has to do with the relation between the two of them. If she takes upon herself a vow not to eat oranges, ever, he can't break her vow, because that doesn't contradict, doesn't create any problem between him and her's relationship. It's something that she doesn't want to enjoy. Let her not enjoy her oranges. What does he care? So he can't break that vow. The question is, if to become a Nazirah may cause a conflict between the two of them that will allow him to break her vow and to cancel it. So the Gemara says that due to the fact that she has to, in the end, do a tiglachat, she has to completely shave all of her hair, that's something that can bother him very much. Why? He can say, Yechol Omar, Efshi b'isha menuvelet. I do not want an ugly-looking wife. And due to that, he can cancel her vow to become a Nazirah.
Rabbi, I've also heard that some Hasidic women shave their hair off completely. Is that even allowed in general? I mean, can a woman shave her hair off completely? Is that allowed?
That's what they like, and that's what their husbands like. But she can't. But if the husband doesn't like it, she can't force it upon him. It's allowed, providing her husband is okay with it. She can't do it against the will of her husband. Or if he doesn't mind, she's allowed to do it.
Rabbi, but I learned that men are not allowed to shave their hair off completely, right?
Men are allowed to shave the hair, except the entire head, except for the area of the peot, this area above ear level, down. That's this area. You're not allowed to shave as a man. Only men. Women can shave even that. Men cannot shave this area, even with using a machine or scissors or anything. And the parts of the beard, men can shave, but not with a razor. You can't use a razor to shave the beard part. But the head, the sideburns here, mustn't be cut down to zero for men only by any means. Mustn't do so, right? So anyhow, the man can cancel her vow because of that, because of looking ugly. But then the Gemara says, there is a Tana who says that he cannot cancel her vow. Why? Because when she goes to the end and has to shave her head totally, she can wear a wig. That's at the other Tana who says, no, he cannot cancel her vow. He says, what do you want? She can wear a wig and then she looks perfectly fine. Even with her head shaven, she put on a wig and she'll look fine.
Rabbi, so this is then a very good source that allows married women to wear a wig.
Exactly. So this is an excellent source. This is in 28b of Tractate Nazir.
And he also says it looks fine.
Right. At least it looks good enough. It may not look perfect, not like today where it can look perfect, but it looks good enough that the husband, it won't interfere with the relationship between her husband and herself, so she can become a Nazir. And a Nazirite, he can't help it, he can't stop it, he can't block it. So again, the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, which is on the side of the Gemara, were directed through the Ein Mishpat to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch.
If you want to learn more about the layout of the Talmud page, you can click on the video link above.
So here, there's a small letter bet over the word Be'anochrit, very unusual. He adds 4 or 5 lines of his own. Usually, if you look up Ein Mishpat, all he does is just directing you to sources. Rambam, Shulchan Aruch. Suddenly, in letter bet, he says like this: Nireli, it seems to me, heter mikan, that we can learn out from this tractate Gemara, permit, lesearot, she'anashim nesuot notnot berashehem. For married women to cover their hair with wigs. Because you see here, the Tanakama, one of the sages said, right, the husband has no argument here. His argument is not valid because she can cover her hair with a wig. So the question is, who wrote Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah? Who wrote these footnotes on the side of the Talmud that direct us to the Maimonides and Shulchan Aruch? The answer is Rabbi Yeshua Boaz, the exact same author of the Shilta Gibori we mentioned before in the Tractate of Shabbat, proving for the Mishnah in Shabbat that a woman can go out with a wig. It's the exact same author who also wrote the Ein Mishpat on the entire Shas. So it's the same person, just he finds 2 different sources. One in Shabbat 64a, one in Nazir 28b. Those who oppose wearing a wig, how do they answer back to his? This seems like very solid proof,
Excellent.
right?
Excellent proof.
So, the answer is, remember, what was the argument in the Mishnah of the Tana who held that a husband can break her vow and not allow her to become a Nazirah? Because he says, I don't want to see my wife looking so ugly, right? Husband seeing his wife looking ugly. Where is that? In the house. Who says we're talking about Rishus Harabim here? Who says we're letting the woman now go out to public domain with a wig? Where did he get that from? He's talking about in the house, within the 4 walls of their house. The husband tells his wife, I don't want to see you as ugly as who knows what, because you're going to shave off all your hair. So the answer is, she can wear a wig. Why? Because it's in the house. Where in the world does he get from here that she can walk outdoors? So for a few months she'll be in the house, because she can't wear, or if she walks outdoors, she'll wear the cloth, the material. In the house, she doesn't have to cover her head at all, because it's only for her husband. He doesn't want to see her ugly looking, wear a wig. think that's tremendous answer to disprove. Okay, now the very last possible proof for wearing a wig in the Gemara of Erachin. Erachin has to do with holy conducts of a person who wants to donate a certain amount to Beit HaMikdash. So he says, I'll donate as much as this animal is worth, let's say. So you follow a certain table of monetary worth, and that's how much he pays to Beit HaMikdash. So there's an estimate that we have, a table of estimates on men, women, different ages. It's all written in the Torah, in Parshas Bechukotai, actually the end of the book of Vayikra, the last parsha of the book of Vayikra. The Torah gives us a whole list of how much are people worth, different ages and genders. That's how much he donates to Beit HaMikdash. So in Tractate Erachin, Zayin Amud Aleph, 7a, again there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses a very difficult situation. Hayisha sheyatza le'areg. A woman who did something very bad, she had committed a very terrible sin, and the Beit Din decided after many, many investigations and proofs and witnesses and all that she's liable to a death penalty. She's taking it out to death. There's all kinds of discussions about all kinds of details. We won't get into the details here. But it says afterwards, after she was killed, we can derive benefit from her hair. After she's dead, we can shave off her hair and use that hair for whatever we want. So the Gemara then asks, upon this section of the Mishnah, the next page, 7b, Ve'amai, Isureya na'aninu, when a person dies, every part of his body, and even the clothing he wore, are Isureya na'ah. We cannot derive benefit from a human body in any way. You can't gain benefit from anything on a human body, except if it's life-saving, like organ donations. We can harvest organs from a dead person's body, in order to save other people's lives. But just to use the hair, that's definitely not a lifesaver for anyone. Maximum, you can make a wig out of her natural hair, but that's not to save anyone's life. The Gemara answers, Amarav be'omeret nu se'ari leviti, meaning when she herself requested before dying that they should give her hair to her daughter. When she herself agreed for her hair to be taken off, to give it to her daughter. But then the Gemara asks, how does that help? Okay, we'll get into the whole discussion of what this means. Amarav bepe'ah nochrit. Bottom line is, we're not talking about her natural hair. That we cannot shave off her head after she dies, because we can't derive benefit from a dead person's body. So the final answer of what the Mishnah meant by that we can take off her hair and give it to someone else, it's bepe'ah nochrit. She was wearing a wig when she was taken out to be killed. And after she was killed, after she dies, you can take off the wig and give it to someone else. That's not part of her body. That's the final answer. Okay. So again, if she was wearing a wig, now here in this case, we're really stuck, because she was taken out in public to be killed. So how did she walk around with a wig if we're not allowing a wig as a head covering in public domain? So this is this is the most powerful source until now.
Rabbi, but the way I understand it is this particular woman that was killed, the reason she was killed is because she wasn't exactly a great wife. So I'm not sure how this really proves anything.
From one point of view, yes, she said she did something very bad. No, that can't be a reason, because you're not liable to the death penalty. But she's not a good woman, you're right. But it doesn't mean altogether she does everything wrong. It seems to be that's okay way to cover one's hair, to cover a woman's hair. This is a more tricky source to wave away. Actually, the only way to answer this is medubar b'shimush b'chatzer. Again, like in a courtyard, like we mentioned for the tractate Shabbos 64a, the Mishnah itself there mentioned that she can only go out with her panachri to the chatzer, to her backyard, to her courtyard, not public domain. To say that it was in a courtyard that she was taken out to be killed there, very problematic.
Rabbi, but the way I understand it, the Sanhedrin and the temple was in the same temple courtyard, so then you could still consider that she was still in a courtyard, or am I mistaken?
Well, definitely it's outside of her house. She walked outside of the house, she got there, and that area itself could be filled with men walking around. It's definitely in public. So this is quite a serious source. Quite a serious source. But bottom line, if we get to the poskim, the Rema in the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim 75b, actually quotes the Shilti Giborim, which we saw twice, once in the Gemara, once in the Mishpat, deriving from two different Gemaras that a woman is allowed to cover her hair with a wig, and that's the final psak in the Rema. So that's a very powerful source for Ashkenazim at least, for Ashkenazic poskim, because the Rema is the equivalent to the Shulchan Aruch for the Sephardim, the Rema is for Ashkenazim. And he definitely bases his final psak on the Shilti Giborim, and so does the Magen Avram, and so does the Mishnah Brura agreeing with it.
So Rabbi, then it's looking very good for Ashkenazim women to wear wigs, since we as Litvaks especially follow the Rema and the Chofetz Chaim who wrote the Mishnah Brura fully. So this is an excellent source for Ashkenazim women to wear wigs.
Looking good. But I guess based on the Gemara in Erechim 7b, which is a very powerful source. But remember, even in the days of Mishnah Brura, which is the very last posting of this lineup of Rema, Magen Avram, Mishnah Brura, even in the days of Mishnah Brura, who was living around 100 years ago, the wigs were totally different than the type we have today. So this is a way to answer to the Gemara in Erechim Daf Zayin, page 7b. The idea of a wig in those days, back in the days of the Talmud, and even up to the Mishnah Brura's days, which is just 100 years ago, we're talking about wigs that are very distinguishable. We could tell it's a wig. It didn't look at all like natural hair. So again, you're not defying the spirit of the law by wearing just a wig, and it's considered a head covering. From Gemara in Erechim 7b, it does seem like a solid proof that it is considered a good head covering. But providing it's that type of wig, the type they used to wear until 100 years ago or less. But the type of wigs they wear today, which are so beautiful looking and so natural looking, and sometimes a natural hair, that's not what the Gemara was talking about. That's how the Mishnah Brura was talking about. So that's where we find the discussion very, very powerful, very strong against. So there's a whole lineup of poskim who disagree with the Rema to begin with, even the wigs of those days. The Marim Means, and the Shud Be'er Sheva, and the Yavitz, and the Efla, and the Chatam Sofer, and the Yeshuas Yaakov, and the Chida, and the Maharsha, many poskim who do not accept the Rema to begin with. The one who is most stringent, and even unrelated to what type of wig, but completely banned the use of a wig, is the Bia Omer, which was Rav Ovadia Yosef. Rav Ovadia Yosef was strong against it. He was very, very stringent against it. He said, they once asked him, he used to say that whoever a woman who wears a wig will end up in hell, Gehenom in the end, for such a terrible sin. So they asked him once, you know how many women that is? Where will there be enough of a fire to burn those women in hell? Of course, jokingly. His answer was, also a joke, they'll use the wigs as the material for the fire to burn them in them. So, of course, that's all like a joke, but he was very stringent against it. And so was Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who was a very big Ashkenazic posek in this latter generation, passed away around 27, 28 years ago. He was also very opposed to very much wearing wigs, especially the natural-looking ones. Those are, by majority of posek, even those who allow wigs, they definitely do not allow those natural-looking wigs, and definitely not the ones that are longer than past the shoulder of the woman. That's already totally immodest. So again, going back to what we said from the beginning, the possibility of covering one's head with a wig is a dispute between poskim. There are definitely powerful sources to base it on, to permit women to cover their hair with the wigs. There are those who disagree, but even those who allow it, and they are powerful, and we can even rely on them, but it has to be a wiggy wig. It has to look like a wig and not look like natural hair. Otherwise, you completely lose the whole idea behind it. And we want to follow Hashem's conceptual ideas and not only the literal letter of the law. So that's definitely would deny the ability of using a natural-looking wig.
Rabbi, and what about the debate about wearing wigs made out of Indian hair, for example, because of the fear that these women are giving their hair for their idols? There's even some women that's starting to burn their wigs because of this issue.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic. Well, of course, that could be easily dealt with by buying wigs that are not from India and not from Avodah Zarah. But I'm saying, definitely not those who buy the wigs from India and may have been used for idol worshiping. Then definitely they cannot be used because that's a sur banha. Again, you can't derive benefit from someone that bowed down to an idol, or the idol was dressed up with this wig or something. So it's definitely not allowed. But that's a specific type of wig. Our discussion was in general. In general, can one wear a wig? When you go into specifics, you have to be careful. Even those who allow, and even those who break the spirit of the law, and wear ones that look like natural hair, they definitely should be aware of this extra prohibition, side prohibition, of not using Indian hair that may have been used for idol worship. That's a valid point that we have to be very careful of.
Thanks, Rabbi, for this clear explanation. But a lot of people ask me, but how can it be that so many religious Jewish Shomer Shabbat women in the modern Orthodox world can wear just a hairband? I mean, we're literally seeing this everywhere. How can such a large group of religious Jewish women, how can they be wrong?
Okay, so this is something that's very difficult to discuss because this deals with a very, very general outlook of a certain segment of the religious Zionist world now. Their perception of religion, of the Jewish religion, is of such that they don't necessarily follow the actual letter of the law, and definitely not the spirit of the law, but they sort of do it their own way. It's sort of a trend. It's a trend in a certain segment of the Dati Leumi world that don't inquire, investigate, ask their questions to big rabbis. They sort of go with the flow and decide things on their own for themselves. And when their feeling is that the whole idea behind a woman having to cover her hair is not for the sake of being modest and not to attract other men and so on and so forth. Rather, it's for the idea behind is to show people that she's married. That's their understanding behind the law, to show people that she's married. And this can be done by just wearing a band over her head that shows that she's married. It doesn't, besides the fact that it doesn't make sense that that's the whole meaning, because if you wear a ring, you're already showing you're married. A wedding band. You're showing you're married. Like men who wear wedding bands show they're married. And you can show marriage in all kinds of ways. But besides that, we can't decide for ourselves what's behind the Torah when it says cover your hair. You first have to follow the law. Then ask yourselves why. But you can't decide why. You make up a reason, and according to that, you're breaking the law. When it says that even kalata, even a basket with a little bit of holes, is already unacceptable by dat yudit, by the tradition. So that means that you have to have it fully covered. Besides the two fingers that we said by the Ramosha Feinstein's Psaq. But other than that, there's no ruling in the world, no posik in the world who would agree to just wear a band. That's something that should be banned because it's against the law totally, and it doesn't matter what way we understand the law and we decide to do it our way. It's just against halacha. It's against psak halacha of all poskim. So I don't have a good explanation. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rabbi, for your very clear explanation about this complex topic and providing so many sources and so much depth to this, and I'm sure it will benefit a lot of people online. Thank you for your time, and may you continue to be blessed in everything that you do.